All right, so you should see the live up at the top. And yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce us. How is it going? Anyone that is tuning in, we are here for the first episode of Messages from the Middle. And today we have a very special guest. Blessing has joined us, and we're going to get into more about who she is and all the greatness that she brings to the table. First, just want to set the scene just a little bit. Why Messages from the Middle? What does that even mean? Who are we, and what are we doing here? So, my name is Nathan Abikwo. I am a Nigerian American, African American. I have many identities, I guess, depending on how you want to say it. And was born in Texas, grew up in Indiana, have lived in DC, and now living in Seattle. Just want to share more facts about why Messages for the Middle is needed. Um, Not sure how many people know this, but there's an estimated 100 million diasporans across the world. And I would have to assume every single one of the 195 countries that we currently exist. I think it's somewhere around there. It fluctuates, right, as new ones come in. Um, we all have differences in cultures and experiences that make up who we are as a person, and you can't know a person fully until you understand the different sides of them, right, and how they may act in certain scenarios, and what makes them, right, what they believe about themselves, what they wish to be believed about them. Um, a lot of different things factor into that. And even in London alone, there's 300 different languages, and I'm sure that's just reported, right? Each one of these cities and countries is becoming more and more diverse, which is a beautiful thing. But specifically talking to people of color in the global Black community, because of globalization, we have to mentally, emotionally, spiritually prepare ourselves to unify, to work well with each other, and be able to live in peace with different cultures. And we only do that by talking about the things and the misconceptions and the stereotypes, the similarities and the differences that we all share. So that's what Messages from the Middle is here to do. It's here to connect different cultures and connect people of different places, and just help show us all that someone who we may have assumed is completely different from us is different, and definitely in certain ways, but they also have similarities as well. So that's a little bit about why we're here. We are going to get into who we are. And so, again, I'll give an intro of myself. I'm Nathan Biko. Like I said, I've kind of grown up in different places in the U.S. Um, Family is from Nigeria, specifically Abuja, some areas around there, Kogi State, if you know. And it's just a blessing to be doing this. I mean, I've done a lot of work in tech, in some like the medical fields, touching some different places here and there. But really, one of my passions is people and just helping people any way I can, almost as a community servant. And I definitely see this work doing the same. So I will let Blessing introduce herself. But I am so excited and grateful for her to be on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Blessing Adogame. I was born in Nigeria, but like Nathan, I grew up in different places, more around the um, different continents. So I grew up mainly in Germany and in Scotland, in the UK, before moving to the United States at the age of 16, I believe. And so, yeah, I've had different experiences just interacting and integrating with different environments, different cultures as well. And currently, I am back in the UK, in England this time, to pursue my master's degree in education and technology. So, yeah, I'm excited for this and for the conversation we're about to have.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much, and congratulations on embarking on this journey. We're so excited for you.
Thank you.
So, I mean, man, just to get right into it, what qualifies us to talk? I think just by being a part of the diaspora, right, is one way that we're qualified to just share our experience and also to hear others and speak on what we know to be true, untrue, potentially true, like the whole spectrum of truth, if you will. We've traveled and seen, as I'm sure y'all have heard in Blessing's intro here, like we've been in a good amount of the world, and even that is a little alone compared to how big the world really is. But most of all, I think what qualifies us is that we care. You know, um, I mean, for one, Blessing wouldn't be here if she didn't care. I've seen her over years and seen the care that she has for our community, our children, education. And so we're going to dive deeper into that. But, Blessing, is there anything else that you want to share about how we're qualified to speak on these experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you said, you know, being in the diaspora in general already qualifies us, but then also I think it's almost kind of like a self qualification because you see many people who are in the diaspora and don't necessarily teach back or don't necessarily talk about their experiences. But I think we want to help other people, and by talking about these things is going to help other people. So I think that also differentiates us from other people as well.
I agree. I agree. And I think that touches on why folks should listen in, right? And that's because you can learn a different perspective, right? Even just between our perspectives here, you can learn something new. You can learn about how to potentially gel with other cultures, right? And you can even just learn, you know, about how to take that quick second to understand that someone may have differences, and instead of taking offense to something that they've said right from the start,
Hmm.
peel back the layer to kind of understand what they're really trying to say, what their core intent was, which really does matter. As you know, one situation we may not touch on in this specific episode, but with Burna Boy and his recent comments, he's yeah, he said something that I believe he didn't mean to say, but that's a topic for another day. So yeah, I mean, for this particular episode, I know Blessing, you've done a lot in early education. You know, working with the UN and a big focus on how can we improve that, the importance of early education, which I believe in as well. I mean, I think it's the root cause of. I mean, I won't say every issue, but most of the issues we face today in society. So, if you would talk a little bit about that, and then we can kind of just go into our childhoods and how our experiences relate to our culture today, who we are today,
Hmm.
and what that might mean for the general diaspora.
Okay, sure. Um, yeah, so as I mentioned in my intro, I was born in Nigeria, but I grew up in Germany up until I was, I think, 6 or 7 years old. So my early childhood was as a Nigerian living in Germany. And so I
Mm,
grew up speaking German. I went to kindergarten in Germany and just a little bit of primary school, which I think the equivalent in America is elementary school, I think. Um,
yeah.
and, you know, it was tough culturally because I was Nigerian, I was black, but everyone else in my kindergarten class was white and German. And I spoke German primarily, at least, outside. And then when I was at home with my parents and my family, I would speak English just a little bit. But it was tough, being so young and having to understand, what was going on and why did I have to move and why am I so different? And it was just a lot. And I don't think I really understood it until recently. And I
Mhm.
think it goes to show that, your early years, maybe from the time you were born to maybe like five, six, seven, eight is a very interesting and pivotal point in your life because there's a lot of things, a lot of changes are happening, a lot of things that you see, a lot of things that might happen to you that affect how you grow up and affect how you live your life. And um, something as well I wanted to point out in terms of like education and in terms of learning is that a lot of people learn differently, and especially at a young age. I wouldn't say there's too much emphasis on okay learning styles and let's tailor the way we teach to young people and everything, but I think that's even more important to do so at such a young age, because when you're so young and you don't necessarily have a lot of answers to the questions that you have, you're already put in these boxes of okay, this is a smart kid, they have a bright future, oh this kid is you know borderline ADHD or they can't focus. So let's just put them in one block, and then they kind of just grow up in that way. And it's like, well, maybe if we learn how to teach in different styles, maybe there's a visual learner versus more audio versus more hands-on. If we learn to teach young people from the ground level, then it will help when they're going, especially going to high school. In the UK, you have your, or at least in England, you have your, I think it's your A levels. So you have to choose three subjects before you go to university, and it's like a lot of people don't know what they want to do at that point, for a lot of different reasons. But I think that it doesn't just have to be a thing where just before someone goes to uni they have to make that decision. It can be something that gradually from when you're in kindergarten you're subconsciously being taught you know different, I guess, different ways, um, that might help you understand what you want to do when you grow up. It shouldn't be just such a daunting task when you're 17, 18 years old. Yeah.
Yes, so true. Let me pause my can just to grab my charger real quick.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree, and I think similarly in the states there is a certain, everyone's kind of mainly put in the same path,
Yeah.
right? Everyone kind of goes through this general, like if you are a this kind of learner, you will succeed, and if you're not,
Yeah.
you will kind of just carry you along. You know what I mean? It's like the
Right.
carrying you
Exactly.
along is just like giving you bad grades, saying that this kid needs special
Hmm.
education,
Yeah.
needs this. Meanwhile, like there's anyone can learn anything, and I feel like
Hmm.
that's something that is just innately true.
Yeah.
But oftentimes the education system doesn't take the time to even figure out how someone learns best to then teach them.
Right.
You
Exactly.
know,
Exactly.
so I mean, just even speaking to your experience, so I went to um, when I was in Texas, I was going to like, a Montessori school, and the type
Okay.
of learning that we were, yeah, so it's like a very much more hands-on.
Mm.
It's like you finish your lesson and you're doing things like playing with the abacus or
Yeah.
or crocheting,
Yeah.
things like that. Where it's like as a
Yeah.
kid, I was very much like a hands-on, tangible, visual learner, and
Mm.
that really worked well for me. Like, I mean, I,
Yeah.
had no problem. And then, kind of later on in my years, when I was kind of put into that, you know, I guess ADHD, doesn't learn the same way
Hmm.
as others. That's why I had I had to struggle at least a little bit more
Yeah.
to get the grades. So.
Right. Dang. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think even to what you said, I remember in Germany as well, we finish like for kindergarten, bit of primary school that I did experience. It was interesting because now that I look back, I realized that we finished school quite early in Germany because there's more emphasis on what you
Mm.
do outside of school. So like extracurricular activities, that kind of thing. Compared to Scotland, where you know, do your school, you finish around 3 p.m., but then you still have a bit of homework. Compared to
Mm.
America, I remember when I came here for my senior year of high school, it was like I might as well be in the classroom 24/7 because when I'm in school, I'm learning. When I'm outside of school, I'm doing so much homework that it's like I do homework up until I go to sleep. And it was just that I think that gradual process of learning, but not necessarily from a place of I want to learn, but I have to learn. And I think that's sometimes a problem with schools when they impose all of these things that it makes learning become such a task that people don't want to do it anymore. It's something they just do because they have to do it, not because they want to better themselves necessarily. They just want to get the grade and dip.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It's like you completely miss the intersection between someone's passion and what they need to learn as a profession to be able to do that passion.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Exactly.
very interesting. I definitely feel like, a lot of folks here can resonate with the experience of once you get out of like middle school or primary school to like middle school, like once you start high school,
Yeah.
the guardrails that kept you in school, whether you liked it or not, are
Hmm.
just like magically, they're essentially removed, and like they don't really care if you learn or not. You
Right.
know what I mean? Because it's
Hmm.
like that's the point in which they're like, all right, well now it's all on you. So if you drop out,
Right.
that's on you. If you stay in it, if you don't learn anything, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so yeah, I definitely overall need more care for our kids in the
Yeah.
education system. But
Exactly.
to kind of like bring it in though, what
Hmm.
ages would you count as early childhood?
Hmm. I would say from around the ages of maybe around like 2 to 3 to 6 or 7. I think like the ages where you're in kindergarten, like nursery. Um. Yeah. I think those ages.
Mm. And I would have to agree. I mean, I think that early childhood, yeah, it probably stops at like yeah, I would say 7, 8. You could
Yeah.
flex it maybe by 2 years, a little higher.
Hmm. Exactly.
Is there some experiences that in your knowledge? Is there certain experiences that every child should have? You know, in terms of learning, in terms of where they're learning. Is there a certain standard of like to effectively learn? A kid needs to have this, needs to have that, needs to have.
Hmm. Hmm. I think there's a lot of aspects to it. Um, on one hand, when it comes to like actual learning, like the content of it, I think that a lot of children should
Mm.
have the freedom to explore and understand different ways to learn. So, you know, when you're in kindergarten, when you're in nursery and you're learning your numbers, you have ways that you can learn with blocks, by putting the numbers in chronological order, or
Mm.
um, visually, you can, maybe like a rainbow, you can put the colors where they're supposed to be in the order for the rainbow, or um, I guess nouns, something by hearing, just different ways so that you as a teacher, you as an educator can see where either the majority of the class sits or where individual children sit with their learning styles. And of course, it's something that grows as you grow, it can change. But at least depending on where the child is and what level they are, they should be able to learn in the best way for them so that they can advance naturally, I guess. Um, but I think another thing a bit outside of the classroom, and I say this because one of the organizations I work with, Their World, they have started a campaign for early childhood education, and their focus is not just on the education aspect itself, but just um, ways in which we make sure that children are actually learning when they are in traditional classrooms. So that could be having the foods, the nutrition, because yes, you can place a child in a classroom, but they haven't eaten all day. So nothing that they're being taught is going inside their head. Or, a
Mm-hmm.
case where the mom can't drop the child off, or she can't get childcare or something like that. And so or she doesn't have a job. So just there's just different things that okay, yeah, is one thing to make sure that a child is in a classroom to learn, but how do you also make sure that they effectively learn? Like what are other aspects of it? Even if they learn when they go back home, are they in a space that they can continue learning or have or are they do they have to be a mother or a father to their siblings? Like, do they even have time to learn? So I think there's a lot that goes into it. And I think that's why people need to take it more seriously because at the end of the day, early childhood, this is a foundation that you're setting up for a child's life. And whether good or bad, that's how they're going to grow up. Of course, we can always change, but that foundation is key. So,
So true. Yes. And I think that's why the work that y'all are doing with Their World is so important because, regardless of how you look at it across the world, whether it's in some of like project areas here in the States or even in
mhm,
some of like the villages back on the continent,
yeah,
there are too many situations where there's kids who are having to be, like a second mom or dad, are having to, you know, do things that children shouldn't be asked to do,
yeah,
other than learning, right?
hmm,
And so I think that it is important to stress that, we can all look at a grade book and say, well, this student got all A's, so
yeah,
clearly they're a good student. And then that student got
mhm,
all F's, so clearly they're a bad student. But it's
right,
really not as, cut and dry as that, you know.
exactly, exactly. It definitely should be a more holistic approach.
Interesting.
But I think that, you know, when you have these conversations with people, the argument could be that, being very individualistic with learning styles and everything is almost not necessarily a waste of time, but it takes up a lot of time. But what I would say to that is that, yeah, it might
Mm,
take a lot more time for teachers and educators to focus and make sure that each individual child is learning. But at the end of the day, you're saving their time years down the line when it's like, when they have to make decisions and everything like that. So I would rather you spend a lot of time on a child's development early on so that you don't have to when you don't necessarily need to down the line. There should be a specific, I guess, order to it.
mm,
Um, but as you said, it depends on cultural context as well. And I like to call it or it is a term called globalization. So looking at both global and local contexts. And I remember last year when
mm,
I was part of the UN's General Assembly, I was on a roundtable with companies that wanted to help, tech companies that wanted to help facilitate education in different countries. And they were talking about
mm,
how one company, which I wouldn't name, but one company donated multiple laptops to a community somewhere around the world. But then the question was also, okay, you donated laptops, which is hardware, but do they have software? Do
mm,
they have enough internet connection
mm,
to actually use the laptop? Like, there's a lot more than just, oh, I want to be nice and I want to provide these things. But you have to look at the cultural context of, is it even sustainable? Like, do they even have power to charge the
Mm.
battery on the laptop to be able to continue using it? Like, there's a lot of things that go into it, and again, a lot of people will think, oh, it's too time consuming. Like, let's just do everything at scale, but that's not effective enough. Honestly, you have to boil it down to, at a local level, what do these people need specifically, and it's not going to be the same everywhere.
So true. I feel like it is unfortunate. It's so great that companies have the, some companies are trying to do those things, but
Yeah,
to your point, right? If you give somebody fish, but you don't teach them how to fish, you don't teach them how to cut a fish, you don't teach them how to
yeah,
sanitize a fish, like they can sit there and look at that fish and be like, "Oh, that's nice, thank you," right? But they're
right,
still not going to eat.
exactly.
And so, it's needed. It's really
Hmm.
needed.
Yeah,
That, I mean, to your point, seeing seeing every community almost like a child, right? That needs their
yeah,
own specific, you know, likes, dislikes, wants, needs, etc. Solved
hmm,
for them, tailored for them. That takes time up front. It saves time when they're, let's say in high school, and they're not going through the problems of, okay, what am I going to do with my life? What college do I want to
yeah,
go to?
right.
Things like this that are very rushed decisions. Like, okay, you're at this age, so just go. But
Hmm.
if you don't prepare to go, then I think we're setting up for failure. So
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
interesting. Yeah. So I mean, just to chop on some of our experiences and how, you know, our childhood had maybe formed who we are today, right?
Yeah.
Quick fire round. Can you give me three likes and dislikes when it comes to food, things that you liked as a child that maybe you don't like now or you do like? How have you changed? How has your childhood impacted who you are today?
Ooh, okay. Three likes and three dislikes, right?
Yes.
Okay. Three likes. I liked being surrounded by people. Um, I liked
Nice.
foods, and I liked like anything creative, anything art. Um,
Hmm.
and then dislikes, being surrounded by people. um, Another dislike would be just what's the word? Like the state of not be, or I guess the rate of change in my environment. And I would also say bullying. Yeah,
Mm,
that's what I'd say.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
All right, that's very fair. Bullying. Hmm. Okay. Well, let me share mine, and hopefully, since I asked the question, I got an answer too, right?
Yep, exactly.
Let's see. Three likes. I really enjoyed being outside.
Mm,
I really enjoyed playing on, sports teams, doing sports and things of that nature.
yeah.
Uh, and I also, I want to say I also enjoyed being surrounded by people because, like, there were definitely times like I enjoyed people. So
Hmm.
I'll include that as a like,
Yeah.
but I'll also include it as a little bit of a dislike, and I'll tie it to bullying.
Yeah.
I was like one of those kids that was very much like on their own. So like they didn't need to. I didn't need to be a part of the group to have fun,
Yeah.
but I also did enjoy being a part of the group. I didn't start any fights, but I would make sure they're finished. You know what I'm saying? I
Right.
didn't lose any. you know? So that I think is a dislike in terms of just bullying and the way people can be sometimes.
Hmm.
I also I didn't like peanut butter, even though I love peanut butter now.
Oh.
And yeah, I know it's crazy, right? um, let's see. One last thing I didn't like. Hmm. I'll say I didn't like. There were some times, right, in Texas where I'd have to stay inside because I was not able to color within the lines. I
Mm.
don't know why, but I would have to stay inside for like recess, like the go
Yeah.
outside time, playground time during
Yeah.
kindergarten, first grade,
Yeah.
and I understand making sure I learned that lesson, but I didn't like having to miss recess to color. So
I hear that.
yeah, so it's very interesting. I feel like these definitely these experiences, like I can see how they formed you know us as we continue to grow. Just
Hmm.
touching on that interesting duality of liking to be around people, but also not liking to be around people. Like as a
Yeah.
child, do you feel like that came about due to like that rate of change, that pacing of like was it being around people that you didn't know or just being around people in general?
Hmm. I think it was. I think. I think a bit of both. Because my dad is a professor, the house was always filled with students or other professors or colleagues or you know always with people, and so it was just a cycle of hi, my name is Blessing. I mean, I was very young, so I didn't introduce myself like that, but it was the idea of okay, you meet someone new, oh nice, but then they leave. But then it was a similarity of when I would move to a different country. You meet someone new, but then
Mm,
eventually I leave. So it was just that constant change of I'm always meeting new people, and of course that's a great thing. It's something that I enjoy doing now. But back then, when I needed to form those strong bonds, it was always just okay recycling friendships and meeting new people like that.
mm,
Which I think at that point I I needed something a bit more um, I guess consistent. And so that's why, now it's a bit weird. I have my different issues, but
nah, that's and it brings up a question. I'm curious because I definitely understand it. And well, I don't understand fully, right? Because I'm not you, but
yeah.
I see what you're saying, and I think there's so my siblings go to a school in D.C.
Hmm.
and in like the area in DC, there's a lot of kids who are their parents are diplomats. So
Yeah.
3 months they're here, the next 3 months they're in
Yeah.
Taiwan, the next 3 months they're in Ghana.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can relate. Like that's a pretty tough lifestyle for a
Hmm.
kid.
Exactly.
But honestly, which I think is crazy, like I'm sure there's people out somewhere like maybe somewhere like in like a more rural country like area where they're like, man, I wish I could be traveling. I wish I could this, that, and the other. So,
Yeah.
do you feel like there's a perfect balance to be struck there, or is
Hmm.
it better to learn in one place?
I think I think there's a balance because with either sides, whether you were born and bred in one area and you stayed there for your entire life, you miss out on experiencing other cultures, other environments. And it's one thing to go on holiday somewhere, it's one thing to actually live in that place that you went on holiday to. So
Mm,
actually living in a place is very, very different. But I think also on the other side, moving from place to place and not really building roots can also be a problem. So I think there is a balance, and I think that balance comes from the time or like the stage in your life that you do so. So I think, in the beginning stages of your life, um, building roots and like having a good foundation is important. And then as you grow older, you get to explore, and especially when you go to college, you might go to college in a different state or in a different country than where you grew up. After that, when you get a job, it might be a different place. So I think at a specific point of your life, you're more open, or it's more expected that you travel and you live in different countries. But at the
Mm,
early stages, it can be a bit difficult, especially because for the most part, you as a child, you don't have the say in it. It's mainly perhaps it's your parents that it's their job or whatever reason that they travel. So yeah, I think there is about.
no, I agree. I think it's like as you grow, those opportunities should be more sought after and are almost necessary because
Mhm.
travel really does teach you and help you to grow. But it made me think of an interesting question. So I'll ask,
Mhm.
where would you say that you're from? And now, where would you say that you're actually from?
Oh my days. Um, I'm actually from Nigeria.
Okay.
But then the other aspect, it would depend where I am currently situated. So
Mm,
before I moved back to the UK, when I was in Germany, even though I mean, I don't think I ever was in a conversation where I'm like, "Oh, I'm from Nigeria," but you just know that I'm from Nigeria. But then when I moved to
mm,
Scotland, I would tell people that I'm from Germany. Then when I moved to America, I would tell people I'm from Scotland. So now I'm in the
uh,
UK, but England. I I don't really know what to say because technically I'm originally Nigerian, but I came from America, but I'm not American because I'm British because I used to live in Scotland. So it's never just a black or white answer. I have to give the full context.
listen, yes, and that's why I had to ask because like
Yeah.
I got the feeling that it was like that. My travel has not been as far as yours, especially like early on. But when people ask me, when I was living in Indiana, people ask me, "Oh, where you
Mhm.
from?"
Yeah.
And depending on the age that I would say Texas. But it got to a point where like all of a sudden, like when I was older in like high school and college, people were like, "What? You're
Yeah.
not from Texas?" And I was like, "Well, hold on." you know what I mean? Like, that's where I was born. But
Hmm.
to be fair, it's like there was a point in which like that switched to actually being Indiana. And so now when people ask me where I'm from, I'm like, well, I've got Texas, I've got Indiana, I've got DC. Which one? Like,
Right.
what are you really asking?
Right.
And I think what's interesting too is I think even in terms of accents, you know, I would say I do have an accent, but I don't
Hmm.
feel as though I have an accent. You know what I mean?
Mm, yeah.
And maybe you resonate with that too, where it's like your accent is actually a blend of the different accents of where you come from.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. For me, people always just they don't know. They don't know where I'm from. I think sometimes there are things that I say that they'll be like, "Oh, okay," but they'll never ask because they're just like, "Oh, yeah, I thought I heard something, British slang or whatever." Oh, yeah, it sounded a bit American. Um, but I think yeah, at this point it's just blended, but it also changes based on who I speak to. So, for example, if I know I'm speaking to a Nigerian person, I might use, Nigerian lingo. If I'm in Scotland, my accent will change based on my environment.
Mm,
But I think it's also something where, like with the whole accent thing, quite ironically, with the name of this podcast, um, when you're like I told you
mm,
before how the way I saw the podcast was like there was a circle and then you were standing in the middle kind of talking out. And I feel like when you're in the middle,
mm,
you don't you don't necessarily think that you have an accent because perhaps where you are in the middle is everyone around you sounds the same. But then it's only when someone from the outside looks in or hears you, they're like, oh, you have an accent. But then you're like, no, I don't have an accent because everyone around you has the same accent. So that's just the norm. It's just the norm. But at the end of the day, everyone has an accent to someone else because, you know, we're not all in Texas, we're not all in London. So we're all different at the end of the day. It's just based on perhaps your surrounding, perhaps you've just heard everyone with the same accent. So there is no accent. It's a very interesting, weird concept, but yeah,
No, exactly. I think you hit it on the nail. Like you hit the
yeah,
nail on the head, as
yeah,
we say here. Like, you know, everyone has some sort of accent to somebody because to someone that sounds like something they've never heard before. But like you're saying, when you're someone who's living amongst a group where everyone has the same accent and you can hear everyone else's accent, you don't hear how your own
yeah,
accent is changing.
exactly.
And I think that even happened to your point. I think that even happens like after childhood to some extent, right? Like
Hmm.
there I wouldn't really say that there's a specific Seattle accent, but maybe there is a way of talking, and maybe there's some Seattleites that were like, "What? We have our own accent. We do this and that
Right.
and the other." Man, I'm sorry, but definitely you pick up on the different slang. Like, I mean, I heard you saying "Oh my days," and I was like, "Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that is so London." Like,
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
um, man, very interesting. So I wonder, like, on that note, are there specific questions that can help our audience, can help folks kind of dive into their own childhood and how their childhood became a part of their culture, how their
Mm,
childhood might relate to, someone within their same circle, but more importantly, how it may relate to someone outside. Like if I am
mm,
Ghanaian and I had a certain way of growing up, how do I discover and connect with someone who is, you know, I guess black and Asian, and they have their own childhood and ways that they grew up and things of that nature.
mm. That's a good question. I think I think a good way to look at it is by, I guess, the characteristics that were birthed through your experiences or through, the memories that you have, because a lot of the time, a lot of people, even if we're from the same, cultural context, we don't have the same upbringing. We don't have the same experiences. We don't have the same memories that we can reminisce on. But sometimes there are characteristics that were birthed through those that you can relate to. And so I know when I grew up, because my experience was all over the place, there was a lot that I couldn't relate to when I would talk to, my friends or just talk to people in
Mhm.
general, because I was like, well, I didn't have friends long enough to experience that, or different kind of stuff. But for example, a characteristic could be loneliness. Someone that was brought
Mm,
up in a rural place in Nigeria might have felt lonely because at a young age they lost their parents and they moved in
mm,
with an auntie that didn't have any children, and so they grew up feeling very lonely because they lost their parents and they're now with another family member, versus someone who grew up in France felt lonely because France is a very white country and they are Indian, let's say. And so two
mm,
very different experiences, two very different memories to look back on, but the same characteristic of feeling lonely is there. And so sometimes we don't need to look as deeply as, oh, what were the specific, memories that you had, but okay, what were some of the things that you experienced, like in terms of characteristics, like what was the time that you were happy as a child, or lonely or sad or confused, or I think that's how we can relate to people a bit more. And I say this even translating to now, like LinkedIn and stuff. When I used to do all of personal branding and
mm,
teaching people how to use LinkedIn, a lot more people can relate to you based on your failures and like your rejections than your successes. And not even that, but also the steps that take you to a specific milestone. You know, not everyone might do their PhD, but a lot of people might have done applications for scholarships or internships or, you know, so a lot more people can relate to you filling out an application than to you doing a PhD, if that makes sense. So kind of bringing it down to basics and actually
Mhm.
trying to break down different experiences that you had. And so the question that I would say is, you know, for people to kind of think back at their childhood and try and understand different characteristics. I think it helps to also bucketize them to say, okay, what were experiences or memories I have when I was happy as a child, when I was sad as a child, when I was lonely. And I think a good way is for
Mhm.
them not to just be standalone experiences, but bridging a gap or finding a bridge between what I experienced when I was 4 years old versus now that I'm 14 years old or now that I'm 24. Like, is there any similarity? Is there anything that I didn't properly process when I was a child that I can now process now? Because what we
Mhm.
find is that a lot of the issues and a lot of the problems that we have now stem from our childhood. But not everyone will find
Mhm.
that connection, and not everyone would want to work to find or to solve that connection or to, you know, figure out a solution to that. So I think starting there of understanding, okay, what was I like as a child? What experiences did I have? And what am I like now? And how can I, if there's an issue, how can I fix that issue? And if there's not an issue, just, you know, how can you continue to grow based on the experiences that you had as a child?
Listen, those are that's the inner work right there. That's the questions that really,
Right.
really matter. I mean, you,
Yep.
you sound like my therapist right now. I'm not gonna but nah, seriously, 110%. Like
Mm.
that is so true, and I really hope folks, and I know folks will be blessed, no pun intended, by that
Yeah.
because that that reflection
Yeah.
alone can take you to some really great places of revelation, right? Where you
Mhm.
finally kind of make that breakthrough, breaking generational curses, things of
Yeah.
that nature. So
Exactly.
yes, honestly, wow. Blessing. Want to thank you again so
Of
much
course.
for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. We appreciate you. Before we go, are there any ways that we can support you, that we can just uplift you? Give us the call to action.
Yeah. So funnily enough, I'm actually writing a book currently that will hopefully, God willing, be published in October. Um, it's called Bound to be Boundless: The Journey of a Third Culture Kid. So it's very much, you know, about what we've been talking about and living in different cultures, different experiences growing up. So definitely, I will send you the link and everything relating to that once I have published the book and open to pre-order and everything. So yeah.
Ooh, please do. Listen, I'm telling you, I haven't seen a single page, but I'm already knowing if you don't read it, you're missing out. Wow, amazing. See, she has even done author.
Yes. Yes.
Well done, well done. Seriously, we're looking
Thank
forward
you.
to it. Definitely, we'll share the links and we'll update it whenever possible, and all that. Uh, man, yeah, we got some other updates in terms of messages in the middle. We'll probably try to upload some of the goodness on like our social media platforms. So catch us on Instagram and all other stuff. Blessing definitely will want your socials to share there so folks can just check it out and follow you on LinkedIn and all that other good stuff.
Yeah.
And before we go, I guess to cap it all over, do you have any takeaways or conclusions that you can share with the group? And I'll try to think of one, and then we'll end with that.
Yeah. Um, so I'd say I was on YouTube Shorts the other day And as I was scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, I came across a short, which I think it was just a TikTok that it's this, I guess, social media personality who does a lot of like videos on her life in Greenland, and she did a collaboration
Mm.
with other social media personality who was in Serbia, and they basically did like a parallel comparison of how similar Greenland is to Serbia. And me, I don't know much about either of those countries, but it was interesting because they're basically educating people, saying that, you know, a lot of the countries that you might think have no connection or have no similarities, they do, right? And so in relation to this and what we've talked about, I think it's important for us to be open to learning from other people, because that's where you realize that, oh, okay, we actually had similarities growing up, as much as we had differences. And I think also in conclusion is that there are more similarities than there are differences. And it's just, I guess, it's your responsibility to be open enough to learn what those are. But, you know, as much as we are different, we are also very alike. So,
Snaps all around. Yes, that's a fact. I would have never imagined that Serbia and Greenland had any sort of
right.
relation. But uh, I mean, my takeaway really just to bounce off of that, I'll say that oddly enough, a lot of our similarities and or highlighting differences can come from, you know, something that you were saying earlier, Blessing, and that is on our brokenness. You know, like
Mm,
the rejections of things that you know you don't want to talk about because you feel like it speaks to who you don't want to be. You know, the failures, the letdowns. Those might
yeah,
actually be the things that people really resonate with because nobody's perfect, right? So we can all resonate
yeah,
with someone, you know, aiming for something and coming short, right?
mm,
So, yeah,
it's true.
that really
It's good.
is some golden nuggets. That was the conclusion of our first little golden nugget session for y'all. Again, Blessing, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate you, your time, your energy, and thank you for your wisdom as well.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for this conversation. Appreciate it.
Hey, I'm telling you, it was truly a blessing to me. So I'm the one that is, you know what I'm saying? The pleasure is all mine.
Uh,
With that
this was really
said, likewise, likewise. And with that said, we're going to end it here. Appreciate y'all for coming on. We move. Peace.